Hello, everyone. This is Steven Gibson, and it has been a while, but it's time for an update on Outlaws and Grimslingers. What you see here is Grimslingers 2. Outlaws has been put on the back burner for now while I finish Grimslingers 2. Now that I've got the rights back, I want to do a new Grimslingers that's completely physical. There's no app or anything like that. So here's the first prototype, and I want to show off a couple of the features and talk about what makes Grimslingers 2 special. So first off, Grimslingers 2 is a completely reworked system. It's still a solo co-op adventure. There's no PvP right now, so player versus player element. It is just story and going off and developing your character and all that. You no longer play as one of the iconic Grimslingers. You are your own Grimslinger, and you're going to develop your character. You are going to play alongside the old Grimslingers as allies, and they will be a big part of the story, of course. This takes place sometime after the original game, probably a couple years. And as you see, regular map is back. It looks nicer and cooler. This is I did not illustrate this myself. I put it together using Incarnate, a map making service online, because obviously doing everything on the project, I need to find ways to save time and still make everything look really cool. So Incarnate is amazing, and it's allowed me to make this really cool map. So you're going to be moving around the map. The numbers refer to specific entries in the area booklet. So when you would land on there, you would go to that entry, and then you would resolve the stuff for that entry. And let me bring this back up. There's lots of yes, there's my Facebook. I should have had this ready already. There's lots of fun stuff in the areas. And this single area, there's going to be, the plan is 3 areas. This is called the in-between. Then there's the shadow of Whistletooth. And then there is Hell's Mouth Canyon. And bonus points if anyone knows what Hell's Mouth Canyon is and what is there. Anyhow, so this one area has more content than probably all of the Northern Territory expansion, including the Valley of Death, in terms of the areas and the things that happen in there. There's one thing missing from this prototype, still a feature that I'm playing with, and that is dynamic events. So these are tokens you would put, you would roll to determine where they're going, and you would put them on different things. So it would be stuff like taken over by bandits, or there's a dragon nesting here now. And it's just a way to kind of keep the world feeling dynamic and getting in your way. And a big part of the game is about the world reacting to you and the choices that you make and not feeling static. So one of the new mechanics is called the Fate deck. And the Fate deck is filled with, it could be weather, it could be someone you've wronged has come back to fight you, maybe somebody's put a bounty on your head and those bounty hunters have shown up. It's all different kinds of stuff like that. Pretty much every choice you make is going to have some sort of consequence, generally. Right now, the only thing that isn't providing a consequence right now are events, but those, I just haven't added the consequences in yet attached to that. So it could be all kinds of different things. Those consequences show up during combat, not just regular travel. And I'll explain how combat works in a moment. The game is designed to play up to 8 players or even more, and it's designed to scale up to that and be really quick and efficient with any amount of player count. Obviously, more players takes a little bit longer, but it's a pretty slick system that I'm still testing, but so far it's working well. The actual box right now is probably only going to have up to 4 players, just so that there's not just a ton of card bloat. So if you wanted 8 players, you could buy 2 copies of the game, and it would go up to 8 players. So let's talk about some other aspects of the game. So you'll be slowly eased into the game through like a playable tutorial that'll explain all the different elements that you're going to be using as you play. So one of those is your weapon. So your signature weapon is kind of a big part of your identity. And this was obviously very inspired by Outlaws, which was all about your weapon and stuff like that. You won't have a character portrait card right now. You're kind of a faceless Grimslinger. And that is something that I will add on to in other expansions right now. But with this being a new game, I wanted to. There's a lot to learn, and I didn't want to be like, here's like 50 ways to customize yourself. Although there's tons of customization. So let's talk about the weapon. Let me grab this. You're going to build and customize your own weapon. And obviously this is a prototype, and a lot of the art is not ready. Some of you have already seen this on Facebook. But just these 3 cards are arted. These ones are as well. So this is your rusty. You start off with a really awful gun. That's not very good. But over time, as you loot stuff, you will upgrade your gun with different parts. And there's tons of different mixing and matching. So let's zoom in here a little better so you can see some pretty cool stuff. And each part has its own special effect and its own special type. So, Hateful Spines is dark, light. And the way that weapons work is you have these weapon attack cards. You have 4 of them. They get progressively more expensive to play during combat. And anyway, your weapon attack card uses its effect is based off of what weapon you've built. Pretty straightforward. So let's talk about some of these things. You get extra power and all that. The grip has an interesting mechanic where if these icons are matching, you get a bonus to your power. And if they aren't matching, you also get a different kind of bonus. So whether you're matching or not, how you decide to build your gun, there's tons of different ways. There are probably thousands of options. In total, there's like 160 different weapon parts across 4 rarities. Right now, this is the common rarity deck. There will be common, rare, legendary, mythical. And then expansions will add new rarity tiers. So there's tons of loot, tons of ways to power up and evolve your character and have these, really cool guns with lots of personality. Let's take these ones away. So that's how your gun works. So that'll be a big part is upgrading your character. Now, this is a deck building game now. Over here is your combat deck. Your combat deck is filled with items and spells, as well as wounds, curses, and blessings. So there's no more health in the game. I'll say this right now. Instead, there are wounds. So you can't actually necessarily be defeated. If you're defeated, you get extra wounds in your deck, which makes it more difficult to accomplish your task for that chapter or whatever you're trying to do. Maybe it's a dungeon you're trying to complete to get some rare loot, and obviously the more wounds you have, the harder it will be to actually succeed. But you'll be able to, use bandages and heal yourself and whatever. So I really like how there's no health. It makes things a lot more cleaner. The game is much more focused on story and adventure as opposed to a crushing difficulty. It doesn't mean it's not difficult. It's just not about winning or losing per se. It's more like time investments, like in most online games today. If you lose, it's more or less a loss of time as opposed to anything else. And that's really how this works. So yes, deck building. So you're going to have a deck of 20 cards, and those can be items and spells and blessings, curses, and whatever. You will draw randomly from that deck at the start of combat. You draw 6 cards, and that's what you have to work with. as you fight the creature. We'll get into how combat works here in just a moment. You also have your... I had showed you... my keybind's not working. Anyway, I was trying to point at this, but you see it. You have your instant access deck. This is a deck at any time you can pull out these cards and use them whenever you want. Your anima's in there, your element spells are in there, and your weapon attacks. You will also have your allies, which are up here, to help you out. So that's like the stuff that you can depend on that you'll be able to use. But your main stuff that you're going to be using is your combat deck. Your instant access deck is a one-time use per card per combat. Your combat deck, you cycle through them, you reshuffle, and then you cycle through them again. Most combats you won't go through all of them. Anyway, so combat is obviously completely different. This has all been redesigned to be very quick to set up. I want it to be less than 10 minutes, less than 5 minutes ideally, and I think it is currently less than 5 minutes. As you can see here, there's a couple decks missing, but it's pretty much just take the deck out and put it on the table. There's no customizing the decks or anything like that, like there was in Grimslingers. You don't need to customize the decks for each area. There's none of that fiddly business. Pretty much just take it out of the box and put it down on the table. And it's just a stack of cards. There will... yeah, so let's talk about combat. So creatures are much more simplified. Each one is meant to have its own unique flavor without making getting in and out of combat annoying. That's one thing I found in Grimslingers. It could be very tedious to set up combat, and to then very lengthy to resolve it, and then very lengthy to clean it up sometimes. That is changed now. So basically you're going to do an attack roll for the area or the event / whatever you're doing will say you're going to fight this creature. You're going to add these modifiers to it. Sorry, that's my furnace turning on. So I apologize if the noise gets a little muddied with the furnace, but I'm going to keep going. Move a little closer to my microphone. So the goblins here, each one has a thing that is either something that is easy to pay attention to throughout combat. Because one thing I found a lot in original Grimslingers is I would sometimes forget to remember what the modifiers were, and I'm sure that might happen still, but things are much more simplified. So modifiers are generally something that happens at the beginning of combat. So like, okay, for this combat, magical cards don't do anything anymore, or hey, everyone gets 1 wound immediately at the start of combat. So something really easy that adds a bit of flavor and difficulty to combat without being overbearing and difficult to manage. So the same thing with creatures. Each one has its own special, like, it comes in and it's like, this one must be played with this modifier always. Or at the end of combat with this thing, you need to resolve the psychedelic trip event. Because it's the peyote scorpion. He's made you hallucinate. So just stuff like that to give it some flavor. Now, creatures all share a deck. They either are... I don't have the other deck in here, but they're either drawing from the natural deck or the magical deck. So they're either natural or magical. And they have... they draw cards from those decks. So there's no customizing the deck. There's no searching through and grabbing the right deck. It's just grab this one. This is their combat deck. And that's what you're doing. And so, like... well, maybe there's a modifier. Okay, so now combat setup, boom. And it's very easy in and out. And then during combat, each player, it's a solo experience. So in order to accommodate update players, combat is generally a solo experience. There are moments where you coordinate or interact with each other. But it's generally, you have a puzzle you're solving, and I have a puzzle I'm solving. And we're winning and losing individually. So like I said, because you can't really be defeated if one person doesn't do as well, they have more wounds in their deck than the other person. So in combat, you draw 4 cards for the creature. Generally, sometimes that changes up. And so you hand out 4 cards to each player, and then that's the puzzle they have to solve in order to defeat that round of combat. In general, the standard is 3 rounds of combat. You need to win more than you lose in order to loot the creature, and that's on an individual player basis. Um, and this is subject to change, but that's how it's working right now. So this is my little puzzle that I have to solve. Confident advance, fake out, swipe, blah blah. And each person has their own. So we're kind of going off on our own, and we're doing our own little combat thing. And then when we're all done the round, we're done, and you'll see what happens next. So this creature, I have to have more power than it does in my cards that I play. So I have my 6 cards here. I would draw them at the start of the combat round. I also have my instant access depth here. So I would look through this and I'd say, all right, he's got 6, 10, he's got 12 power. So I want to reduce that or do more than ties go to the player, so I need 12 or more. So this one says only a card with a power of 4 or more after other card effects have been applied can be played across for this one. So I need a big one for that one. So I know my lightning is always a big card that I have access to. It actually gains 1 power if it's played next to a weapon attack. So I might want to play my weapon attack right here for 1 energy. And your energy now is not something you're managing over the course of your adventure. When you enter into combat, your energy is 10. When you exit combat, your energy is 10. It's always resetting. It's more about managing your energy within a situation. So that was just an easier way to design the game, knowing that, okay, players have 10 energy when they encounter this thing, and I'm going to make it difficult based on that knowledge. So I know when you're entering combat, you have 10 energy. And, thankfully the furnace turned off. Or that's the water heater. Anyway, so you have 10 energy. So that's like your baseline. And it's always resetting, makes it a lot easier. And also makes the game a little less annoying, because there'd be times where it's like you would get caught with your pants down, so to speak, and it was irritating because you'd be like, you'd have 1 energy, and this event would probably tax you 10 energy. I don't know. So it's a little more about making smart choices instead of just being like beaten down by the game, I guess is a way to say it. So I got my lightning out here to defeat the confident advance. If I feel like I can't win, I can just forfeit and save myself from losing these cards, which might be the case. Correct, paralyze. So when you start the game, you start with really terrible cards, and you will upgrade them as you loot stuff. You know, like a mini mana worm instead of a small, regular mana worm. This one could be pretty cool. He actually pulled a really strong hand here. A card can only be played at random across from this card. If a foe wants to play a card across from this one, it cannot be the last combat slot filled. So I would have to... I don't like that one. I have to play a card randomly there from this selection, which is not great. Supplies can be helpful. Discarded artifact is not good here. Gain 2 energy. So I can't play my weapon attack there. But what I could do... That card's going to be a problem for me. But I have a wind, which doesn't... Its special feature is it doesn't count as one of the... Because I'm only allowed to play 4 cards, it doesn't count. Wind is special like that. But you have to make sure you use it wisely, because it's once per combat. And I can rearrange my foe's cards, so I'm going to put Fake Out here. And yeah. So now I'm going to do my weapon attack, which gives me 3 power, 1, 1, and my match bonus. That costs 1 energy. This card gains 2 power. So this card would go to double the power if a magical or dark card is played across from it, which I have not done because my weapon is natural. And now I'm going to. So this is 6 plus 3 is 9 plus 1 is 10. So I just need 2 more. And I could use my elements, which is easy. That one's worth 2. So what I could do, this is not efficient, but I'm gonna do it just to show it. I can only play a card at random from there. Well, see, Earth lets me say the cards next to it can't be flipped, and this one flips the card played across from it. So Earth would protect it, and then I could play, I don't know, Jantlers or something like that. But I could also instead of, oops. Yeah, this is a tough situation because this one's going to get flipped. And this one, a card can only be played at random. Well, let's hope for the best. Ah, perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. So cracked, paralyzed does cost me 4 energy. But I can ignore the effects of all my foes' cards. So now this one's not going to get flipped over, and that allows me to play my Jantler, which may help me. I guess I don't need to play my Jantler. I can play. I don't know. This would be again not the most efficient. I probably should have played water, but yeah, that was a terrible idea because now I have 0 energy. But I have some mana worms here I can use. Right now actually, so I discard those and I gain 4. So then I would beat them with this hand up. Now these cards, these get discarded. So now the problem is because I use 2 of my weapon attack cards, the only ones left are cost a ton of energy to play, and I don't have that energy. And then yeah, and then their cards would get discarded. So that was one round of combat. So each player would kind of do that on their own. And I'm still deciding, how many rounds of combat are right. Before I fill up my hand from my combat deck again, after each round of combat, you draw from the Fate deck. So the Fate deck is like all your, it's like, hey, bad weather hit, and so everyone loses energy, or good weather hit, everyone gains energy. Or it could be stuff like, for the next round of combat, all players must play their cards randomly from their hand. Like there's a Shroud that happened, and that would have been a consequence for, I don't know, messing with something, dark magic or something. Reality Fracture. Oops, that card shouldn't be in there. Earthquake. So different things to add that more thematic story element to combat and break it up. And it's things that players generally have to deal with together during combat. And it's like, it could be like, oh, there's a hungry beast that showed up. Which player is going to deal with this? Is it me? Is it you? One player needs to take on that challenge. Sometimes we all take it on together. So that way we are still playing together and working together. But yes, combat is generally a solo experience. That was an important feature to make sure that combat could scale to any player count without taking too long or players becoming way too overpowered. Because you'll notice in most co-op games, the difference between 1 player and 4 players in terms of their versatility and utility is monumentally different. It's very hard to design an encounter that's difficult for one player and not much easier for four players. So this way it kind of isolates the experience so that I can make sure that like each encounter is much tighter. And the reason I really like creatures all sharing the same deck is, one, it's fast. It's also allows me to craft a very tight kind of puzzle in these magic or natural deck. And so I think it works well and smooth. So after we would do 2 more rounds of combat. And if in playtesting, I find that, I don't want combat to last more than 10 minutes. For me, 10 minutes for a regular combat is correct. So it's probably going to be 2 rounds of combat. And then for harder ones, obviously longer is fine. And, for really epic bosses, I'm fine with that being an hour for that single combat where you really put yourself to the test in the deck that you've built. So if I win more rounds than I lose, I would get to do a loot roll, which you would roll the dice, and I got a 6, so I would get to draw 1 rare loot card, which I don't have the rare deck in here right now, but I would get to get a rare thing. So that could be an item, it could be a spell orb. These were previously signature weapons, or weapon parts, and so I just think the loot system and how you're designing your character is tons of fun. So you're really crafting this deck. And then when you're done playing the game, you just, gather up your deck and there will be a spot in the box so you can just pop your deck. You also, so I will say, when you gain loot, it goes into your stash, which is over here. I don't have it right now, which would be, also at the end of combat, your cards just come back. There's no like paying energy to reactivate and all that stuff. Everything just resets. Your energy returns back to 10. Everything resets. You're good. That's fantastic. So your stash is over here. You can't access your stash except for at designated areas. So your stash is kind of like your inventory. That's when you can swap things in and out of your deck. Because I don't want people like stopping, okay, let's play with their deck. For like when you go to town, yes, you can play with your combat deck and mix and match and redesign it and all that stuff. So the adventure, let's briefly go over some of these other things. Allies are kind of like do this one thing during combat. Blessings give you boosts. They're nice to have in your deck. They don't count towards your deck hand size. I mean, your deck size is 20, and then blessings and curses go on top of that. So you can have 20 items and spell orbs in there, and then curses and blessings don't count towards that total. Wounds go in there. They do all kinds of stuff. Like they would go into play and they would fill a combat slot. Well, maybe I won't have them do combat slots. I'm still figuring that out. Curses do bad stuff. And yeah, so it's really about, obviously the awesome Grimslinger story. Each of these areas has a ton of different options. Like the Hanging Tree lets you loot corpses or pay respects. And those have different consequences. You also have Infamy, which is not currently, I don't have a tracker in the game right now for it, but Infamy allows you into different towns. It gives you different options. So if you're really bad, you can get into the really bad places that have really good wares for sale, but there are obviously negative consequences to being bad, which happen. The consequence deck fills that out. Oh, in saying that, when you kill a creature, you have a consequence roll for it. So like if I kill these goblins, their friends might come back to haunt me later, or, their mother was mad that I murdered their children and has cursed me now. So all kinds of funny, crazy stuff like that. Anyway, yeah, these places have tons of options and challenges. Like the abandoned Warlight Fortress is like a big mega boss you can fight for really awesome loot if you feel like going there. On the flip side of this map, which is not designed yet, there is the Hidden Kingdom of the Immortal Grebo, which is a dungeon / raid like experience where it's like a whole area focused on obviously this one spot, and it has really tough. It's like, think of it like the endgame area. It's really tough, lots of loot, cool stories, and stuff like that. So That's a brief overview of where Grimslingers 2 is at. This is my first prototype of it, where I'm really getting to play it and make sure everything works together. But it's been smooth, and I am happy with it. So thank you for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, leave a comment. And as always, I appreciate your support.